Following the design of the frame, we considered additional ways of engaging the public during the day of the workshop. Continuing the theme of Ireland, we decided to wear t-shirts with questions on them that provoked further reflection on the topic. Out of the 12 of us, 6 wore the t-shirts and were open to discussion with the public, while 6 of us wore our normal clothes, covertly encouraging the public by leading by example. The 6 questions were: Welcome to Britain, Great Britain, Open Britain, Britain needs EU, Embrace it, and How British are you? These same questions were written onto a proportion of the luggage tags to start off the discussion within the central room.
As a form of documenting our installation, we followed the journeys of individuals through the British Pavilion, which allowed us to analyse how and why they engaged in the way they did. With their permission, we followed 3 couples from the Czech Republic, France and Austria who all experienced the work in different ways. We juxtaposed this footage with an animation that tracks these journeys. In doing so, we can begin to understand what each couple found interesting and how this affected their routes. We can also see if there were moments within the installation that caused the users to pause or elements that were revisited. It also shows how the individuals engaged with our workshop, as all 3 couples at some stage interacted with the cube, whether it be reading other people's tags or adding their own.
This animation shows a representation of different people that visited the space during the day. As they move through the space, they form a trail, which then builds up over time to show how densely the spaces were used. To develop this further, it would have been beneficial to leave sensors in each room to give a more quantitative reading and for a longer period of time during the day. Mapping the movement of people through the pavilion highlighted the paths that were most commonly used by the visitors. Approximately 60% of people chose to walk around the pavilion in an anti-clockwise direction. In room 1, most people walked through without pausing, although some stopped to sit on the stools. Those that were walking in a clockwise direction tended to find the shortest path to the next doorway and seemed more hurried than those walking in the opposite direction. In room 2, very few visitors stopped in this room for the first part of the day. Those that were travelling in an anti-clockwise direction were more likely to travel through the tunnel. In contrast, of those that travelled in the opposite direction, only half of them walked through the tunnel. As the day progressed, the majority of people would walk through it as their path was blocked with the folded drawings. In room 3, visitors walked parallel to the frame and didn't weave through it as we'd hoped, but they did stop to admire the work that the students had set up in there. Room 4 produced the most varied of journeys. 60% of people travelling in a clockwise direction walked through the timber door frame. The rest had to step over the frame. People that were travelling in the anti-clockwise direction did not seem to follow any particular path at all. After a stool was added to the room and the twine was woven into the structure, people paused for longer in this room. Finally, in room 5, during the early part of the day, people spent very little time in here. But as more was added to the room, people started to linger for longer. Bringing stools into the room invited visitors to sit and engage with the mirror and walk all around it. Room 0 was the first and busiest of the rooms within the Biennale. This was partly to create a lasting impression, but more importantly because each of the rooms were part of the journey with a clear start and end. Throughout the day, many luggage tags were added to the structure with multinational responses. The workshop started with pre-made drawings, but throughout the day, these were then added to by visitors. The end result was a collection of drawings that spread beyond the realms of Room 0. The original drawings that started their journey in this room had been moved and installed into other rooms of the pavilion. What had started the day as the busiest of the rooms had become one of the most empty by the end of the day, with the exception of the main structure, which had become a dense mass of tags. Room 1 had been designed to be a calm space where the people could pause for a minute within the Biennale. At the beginning of the day, this worked well and the stalls were being used for their intended purpose, but as the day progressed, the dynamic of the space evolved. Stalls were gradually removed from the room and drawings were left in their place. This meant that the room suddenly became busy and slightly disordered. Fewer people were using the stalls as seats to rest, and the drawings were also connected using tape along the floor, which only added to the disorder of the room as it started to create boundaries. Room 2 started the day as a simple frame with detail paper either side that created a tunnel. Visitors walked around the sides of the tunnel instead of through it, as we had expected. The aim was for them to pass through it and feel immersed within the projections from either side. The space evolved throughout the day. The drawings were added to the outside of the tunnel. The drawings started to act as barriers for the visitors. Gradually they changed their direction of travel and began walking through the tunnel, as it became the path of least resistance. Furthermore, people began to walk more slowly through the tunnel, as tags were hung from the top. This addition to the room led visitors to use the space as we had designed. Room 3 had always been designed to be a blank canvas, although how this would work was intentionally left to interpretation. This space went from one of the quietest to the busiest by the end of the day. The third-year students and Ryan used this space for their part of the workshop. One by one, they were connected to the frame using the tape. During the day, the frame then started to encapsulate the drawings that had come from the fine art workshop. It was at this stage that the space had been completely transformed. The room was now a hive of activity. Consequently, visitors had started to move through the space differently. Where they had been keeping to the outside of the frame, they were now walking through the frame. It seemed that they felt that they were missing out on something behind the newly formed wall of drawings, which is why they changed their direction of travel through the space. Room 4 was always about the way that people navigate through the space. It was our interpretation that individuals would follow the path through the door frames, both permanent and temporary. At the start of the day, visitors did exactly this, but as the room began to fill with drawings, luggage tags and models, visitors started to stray from the path. The dynamic of the space changed during the course of the day. Visitors were more engaged with the work that surrounded the frame than the atmospherics created by the timber structures. Although it was a less active space than some of the other rooms, it had now been filled with many drawings that were all linked back to the frame. The frame had served its purpose, to be a backdrop that fine artists and their workshop would respond to. The art that inhabited this room brought it to life and interestingly altered the way that people navigated through it, a topic that was pivotal throughout the design of the frame. Visitors were naturally engaged with the reflections that the mirrors cast in Room 5. As a result of this, fewer drawings occupied the space than the other rooms. They generally kept to the edges of the room as the mirror commanded centre stage. The clustered drawings acted as a barrier to the path that visitors were taking through the room, and consequently people changed their direction of travel. Although unlike the other rooms, the stalls took on an important role. We found that visitors were peering into the mirror but not walking round the back of it to notice that it was slightly transparent. To counteract this, we offered a visual cue to the visitors by adding stalls either side of the mirror. In this room, the impact of the drawings was far less prominent as the mirror itself was such a strong feature within the room. The stalls, on the other hand, aided the interaction, which is why they were such a success. The social media interaction has been largely successful with 9,425 content impressions on Twitter. Impressions are the number of times our content has been viewed. The top tweet was sent out on the 25th of October and was viewed 1,201 times, and this set the pace for the following days as there was a 3% increase in engagement rate on the week of the workshops. Between the 20th of October and the 20th of November, the Twitter page has 630 profile visits and more than 20 mentions from prominent accounts like La Biennale di Venezia and the British Council, as well as academics from Europe. The first video was made to show the journey of the workshop from arrival into Venice to proceedings on the actual day. The video is meant to present the whole event to a person who had no idea about what we were doing in Venice. It was meant to be more of a fun video that tacitly represents events of the day without going into deeper detail of the actual construction and development.